if there are kids coming into the environment and they're putting hurt, harm, or danger facilities withstanding, there still has to be some, there's a lot of smart people that work there to figure out, how to make this work even with those limitations.
Yes.
They put in the effort to make sure that.
I can give you, for example, one of the concerns in the original findings was the risk of suicide. The sheriff brought in the national expert on juvenile detention facilities suicide abatement. They then institutionalized his recommendations in policy to treat children who are at risk for suicide. We then, the sheriff, I keep saying we because we work so closely together, the sheriff then took the people that were in detention and the folks that he added from his other facilities, put them through the training on how to de-escalate conflict in the facility. If you would go up there right now, I was doing a tour 2 or 3 weeks ago, and a young man got really upset because he thought it was his time to use the phone, and another kid picked it up. Well, they immediately, their chests swelled up and they were butting one another, and I watched the detention staff. It was just a beautiful thing to see how they just kind of swarmed them, didn't lay a hand on them, just started talking to them. Right. Another young man in detention walked up and took one of the young men and moved him back. They de-escalated the whole situation. There was no argument, there was no fighting. Now that's not to say they still don't have scuffles, they do, but the staff is trained to de-escalate any problems they have, which protects them because these kids are big and strong, but it also protects the child. One of the things the staff was trained on that we're trained on, the children we deal with come from such traumatic backgrounds that their brains aren't like ours. We know the science now, and what the science tells us is that when you're 3 and 4 years old and you don't know where the next blow is coming from, you operate in a fight or flight mode essentially 24/7. That chemical imbalance in your brain when you're in the fight or flight mode physically changes your brain. In fact, it was yesterday, we had a young lady on a detention hearing who, when the judge detained her, went off. Wow. Well, if you know her background, you wouldn't be surprised. Think about it. She got picked up on an aggravated assault charge, okay? She comes in handcuffs in the back of a patrol car. She's locked in a detention facility. She can't escape overnight. She's in that fight or flight mode, okay? She's then brought down a secured elevator into a secured hallway into a secured courtroom by bailiffs. She's scoping out her environment, probably unintentionally, but that's how her brain's working. She figures out she can't flee. She's not going to get away with 6 bailiffs in the courtroom, right? So when the judge said, we've got to detain you until trial, and she gets upset, her first reaction when she can't flee is to fight, right? We know from the science and the trauma training we've received that that reaction is not unusual. Sure. And it can be expected, okay? It took 5 staff members to get her calmed down and get her upstairs once they got her back into the secured hallway. And I was talking to a couple of them afterwards, and I said, if you look at her background, and I haven't looked at her background, I don't know what it is, but I'll bet you one thing, it's been horrible, okay? She can't help but act any other way.
But so many of our young people have gone through, at no fault of their own, tremendous trauma.
Absolutely.
They are really facing many mental health challenges.
Absolutely.
What, if anything, under your leadership here at the court, is being done to bring to bear mental health resources to help folks? Because clearly, there's the aspect of the physical restraint and make sure that they don't hurt anybody, that they don't hurt anybody else. But ultimately, if you're dealing with a population of people that really need beyond a whole lot of things, access to mental health professionals that can really help them talk through and understand some of the emotions and some of the feelings, so that they can make better decisions, both while they're under the tutelage of the court, and then when
outside,
they get outside,
right.
so they don't end
Right.
up back in.
Right.
What kind of things are you doing relative to mental
One
health?
of the really good things of the MOA, Debbie Featherston, who was county attorney working with our chief staff attorney at the time when they drafted it, looked at our medical situation here at the court and was able to piggyback on the county's medical policy with CCS. At the time, Dr. Terrell was our pediatrician. He's been the pediatrician down here for 25 years. Love Dr. Terrell. Wonderful, wonderful man, understands these kids better than anybody, but he's not a psychiatrist.
Right.
When we got the contract signed on CCS, we now have a full medical staff upstairs. They're nurses and nurse practitioners. We have access to not only a child psychiatrist, but we also have access to a child psychologist. And Dr. Terrell's still our pediatrician. So about 70% of our kids come in here with some type of mental health issue.
Right.
So we try to ferret that out in the beginning. Now understand, our hands are tied. We can't ask the kids a lot because they've got lawyers.
Right.
All right, so you have to be careful how you do that. But we assess those children when they come in. And we don't let the police leave until that first assessment is done, because if this child's in crisis, that police officers are going to transport him to the hospital and get him out of our facility. So that was one of the very, very positive things we did early on.
Yeah.
The second thing we've done, and we just completed it in June, the staff of juvenile court to a person has been through what we call our initial phase of trauma training. Trauma has become known in the criminal justice field as one of the key reasons that we have crime and criminal behavior. Those of us, and I just got back from a conference in Washington of 600 juvenile and family court judges from across the nation. Everybody's clued into trauma. If we can bore down into these families where trauma is affecting their behavior and get the services in place to mitigate the effects of that trauma, we can solve a lot of the criminality problems that we have.
Right.
It's hard to do, but it's doable.
Right.
So the first thing I did was I pestered our National Juvenile Court Council to do a trauma audit of the juvenile court here in Memphis.
Okay.
We are now trauma trained, trauma implemented, and the initial session was kind of an introduction to the world of trauma.
Okay.
They are now working up the curriculum to do a very intensive focus for the people that are confronting our clients: judges, probation officers, Youth Services Bureau counselors, Child Protective Services workers, the DAs, the public defenders and private bar, and our bailiffs. Our bailiffs need to know how to approach a child who's been traumatized. Being trauma informed does two things. One, it allows judges and staff members to recognize those signs of trauma when the family walks in the door.
Right.
What are you looking for? Okay. And two, it gives us a better understanding of the reason why that child is here. Now, I'll say again, it's the reason they're here. It's not an excuse for their behavior. We still have to hold them responsible for their behavior.
Sure.
But, you know, the one reason I like this job and the one reason I do this job is that punishment's not in the statute.
Right.
It's rehabilitation. So, we have a unit here called Evaluation and Referral. Now, it's not new. I didn't start it. Judge Turner did in 1968. It is staffed with professionals who know every single service provider in this community, not just in Memphis and Shelby County, but in North Mississippi, Arkansas, East Tennessee, Iowa. They know them all.
Right.
And what happens in court, let's say we have a young man come in for domestic violence, which is one of our biggest complaints. The judge hears the case. There's proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he did in fact commit domestic violence. She may put him with a Youth Services Bureau officer as a probationary period, who is now trauma informed, who knows that family better than anybody,